So let's jump right into this book, Antidote. The whole idea here is pretty powerful. It takes some of the biggest struggles in Christianity and says, hey, these aren't just failures, they're poisons. And here's the kicker. For every single poison, there's a cure.
The book kicks off with this really potent question. It asks you to imagine for a second, what if all those deep-seated fears you have, the guilt, the regret, what if they're not just feelings? What if they're actual toxins, being pumped into your spiritual bloodstream, just doing damage day in and day out? And then comes the million-dollar question, right? What if there was already an antidote for all of it? A cure that's just there, ready to be used, not something you have to earn.
So to make this whole thing stick, the book doesn't just start with a metaphor. It starts with a crazy true story about a KGB double agent named Boris Korczak. This guy gets poisoned with cyanide. I mean, talk about a bad day. But here's the thing. He survives. How? Because he was ready. He knew exactly what poison he'd been hit with, and more importantly, he knew the antidote and exactly how to use it. And that real-life story, that becomes the whole blueprint for the rest of the book.
All right, so first up, the book goes after what it calls the oldest poison in the Christian faith, one that it argues completely messes with our understanding of who God is.
So what is this first poison? Well, the author labels it as the doctrine of hell. And it's not just the idea itself, but how it's been used as a weapon of fear. This notion that God's love isn't infinite, that it actually has a cutoff point.
And the author argues that the damage this has done is just massive. It completely twists our picture of God, turning this loving father into a figure of pure terror. As the book puts it, it turned the father of love into the warden of a cosmic prison.
So what's the antidote to that kind of fear? According to the book, it's a completely unconditional, no-strings-attached love. The idea is simple. Perfect love drives out fear. It puts forward a picture of God who, at the end of the day, doesn't lose anyone or anything. He brings it all back home.
Okay, so from the big picture of God, the book then zooms in on us. It looks at two more poisons that, it claims, totally warp how we see our own pasts.
First up, we've got regret. The book calls this a really sneaky poison. It's the one that turns your own mind into a courtroom, where you're constantly putting your past on trial, replaying every mistake, and convincing yourself that you somehow broke God's perfect plan for your life. And this is where the author presents a pretty stark choice. It's like you have two voices whispering in your ear. The voice of regret is always saying, you messed up, you ruined it. But then there's the voice of sovereignty, which just calmly says, nope, you're living it. And that's the antidote. Right there. A deep, profound trust in God's sovereignty. The book's argument is that God is the author of your story, and I mean the whole story, including all the screw-ups and failures. It's all part of the script, written with a loving purpose. Which means, if you really believe that, then nothing was ever truly a mistake.
All right, next up is guilt. The book has a great line for this one, calling it the heavy residue of religion. You know that feeling? Even after you've been told you're forgiven, there's this lingering sense that you're still on probation, that you still owe something.
And to fight this, the book makes a really, really important distinction between two words, forgiveness and justification. See, it argues that forgiveness kind of says, okay, you're guilty, but I'm going to let it slide. Justification, on the other hand, is something totally different. It's like God saying, in my eyes, you were never guilty to begin with.
So the antidote here isn't just about getting a pardon, it's way bigger than that. The author's point is that in God's eyes, the verdict was always innocent. It's not about wiping your criminal record clean, it's about being told you were never a criminal in the first place. Your whole identity gets rewritten.
Okay, this next poison the book talks about is a really sneaky one. And that's because, from the outside, it can look a whole lot like genuine faith and devotion.
This is the poison of striving. You know what I'm talking about, that religious treadmill of just trying harder, pray more, do more, be better, all of it in an attempt to get closer to God. But the book argues that's all based on a huge illusion, the idea that you were ever separate from Him to begin with.
And the book uses Jesus' last words on the cross as the ultimate trump card against striving. Think about it. He didn't say, all right, I'm almost there, can you guys help me finish this up? No, he said, it is finished, done, complete, the job's over.
So what's the cure for striving? It's rest. And we're not talking about being lazy here. This is a deep, settled confidence. It's about finally getting that the work is done. It's the huge shift from living for grace, trying to earn it, to living from grace because you know you're already standing in it.
And all of this brings us to the book's grand finale, really.
It's where all these different antidotes, all these cures, are traced back to one single, all-powerful source.
And here's the big reveal. According to the author, things like unconditional love, sovereignty, justification, rest, they're not really separate cures. They're all just different expressions of one single ultimate reality, what the book calls the super antidote, which is Christ himself.
This completely changes the way the book presents the cross. It argues the cross wasn't some kind of cosmic courtroom where a debt was paid to an angry judge. No, it was more like a hospital, a cosmic transfusion where all the poison of humanity, sin, fear, death went into Christ so that the pure, divine life of God could flow back out into everything.
The author breaks this whole process down into 3 key stages. First, you have the poison being absorbed on the cross, all that sin and death and fear. Second, you have the antidote proven to work with the resurrection, proof that life is stronger than death. And third, you have the cure now at work, this ongoing process of healing everything until it's all made new.
Now, this whole way of looking at things comes from the book Antidote, which is published by Study Shelf. And it's definitely a view that challenges a lot of the traditional stories by framing everything as an act of healing, not just a legal transaction.
And so the book leaves us with this one last, really challenging thought. It makes the claim that the author of your story has already finished it, and he's declared it's good. So the real question isn't will it end well, the question is what changes for you, right here, right now, if you actually believe that was true.